you're still here, and that means something. Not many people sit with 3 hours of this kind of quiet. Not many people choose, at the end of a day that has already taken so much, to go deeper rather than shallower, to ask more rather than numb more. The fact that you are here, that you started part 1 in the restlessness of an unsettled evening and have moved through 50 truths and arrived at this third part, this speaks to something in you that wants what philosophy, at its best, has always offered. Not answers, not comfort exactly. Something more honest than both. Something like the company of people who took the difficulty of being alive very seriously and found in that seriousness something worth living for. The Stoics called it tranquillitas animi, the tranquility of the soul. Not the tranquility of the person who has sorted everything out, not the peace of the person with no problems, not the stillness of someone who has stopped caring, something entirely different. The tranquility of the person who is fully present, fully engaged, fully alive, and is no longer fighting the nature of things. There is a story about Epictetus that his students told. He was asked once by a visitor what the essence of his philosophy was. He thought for a moment and then he said, "Bear and forbear. Bear what is given to bear, and forbear. Hold back from reacting to what does not require reaction." The whole of Stoicism is in those 4 words, and the whole of these final 25 truths is the slow, patient unpacking of what they mean in the lived reality of a human life. Let us enter the last territory, Truth 51. Peace is not something you arrive at, it is something you return to. This distinction is subtle, but it is one of the most practically important in the entire tradition, because the model most people have of inner peace is of a destination, a place you get to, a state you achieve once you have done enough work, or resolved enough problems, or found the right person, or the right path, or the right understanding. And from within that model, every disruption feels like failure. Every difficult emotion that surfaces after a period of calm feels like a relapse. Every day when the peace is not there feels like evidence that you haven't actually found it, that you are still somehow short of where you need to be. The Stoic model is entirely different. Seneca wrote, "Withdraw into yourself as much as possible. Associate with those who will make a better man of you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. The process is mutual, for men learn while they teach." He was describing a process of returning. Not a single act of finding. You turn inward. You find something quiet there. The world calls you back out. You return to the world, to the life, to the engagement, and then you turn inward again. Peace is not the absence of disturbance. It is the capacity to return to yourself after disturbance, to refine the quiet center, to remember again and again what you actually are beneath the roles and the performances and the noise. You will not find peace once and keep it. You will find it, lose it, and find it again and again and again. And the finding gets a little easier each time, because you have found it before and you know the way. That is Truth 51. Truth 52. Virtue is its own reward, not metaphorically, literally. The Stoics made a claim that sounds almost naively optimistic when stated plainly: virtue is the only good. Nothing else, not wealth, not health, not pleasure, not reputation, is good in the full sense. These are preferred indifferents, things worth having if possible, worth pursuing within reasonable limits, but not goods in the deepest sense because they can be taken from you. Virtue, courage, wisdom, justice, temperance cannot be taken from you. It is entirely yours, and it is, the Stoics argued, its own complete reward. The virtuous action is fully satisfying in the doing, regardless of what it produces. This sounds like philosophical idealism, and there is a way to read it as such. But there is also a way to read it that is grounded in direct experience. Think of the last time you did something genuinely good, not for recognition, not for reward, not for the approval of others, Something that cost you something, your time, your comfort, your ego, and that you did anyway because it was right. Think of how that felt. Not the pride, which is about the ego, the quiet underneath the pride, the simple, unadorned sense of being consistent with what you actually are. That feeling is what the Stoics meant. That quality, the inner alignment between your values and your actions, is not a means to something else. It is not instrumental. It is the thing itself, the good, the thing that makes a life feel worth living from the inside. No one else needs to know. The receipt is internal. That is Truth 52. Truth 53, the mind that judges constantly is never at rest. There is a kind of mental activity that runs nearly continuously in most people, and that produces enormous fatigue while producing very little of actual value. It is the activity of judgment. The constant rating and ranking and evaluating and comparing and labeling of everything that enters the field of experience. This is good. That is bad. This person is worth respecting. That one isn't. This situation is an improvement on what came before. That one is a step backward. This feeling is acceptable. That one isn't. This version of myself is okay. That one falls short. The judging never stops. And underneath the exhaustion of a difficult day is often not the difficulty itself, but the sheer energy cost of all that judging. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, and do so with all your heart." Love the people with whom fate brings you together, not judge them, not evaluate them against your standards for acceptable people, just love them in the sense of being genuinely open to them, genuinely interested in them, genuinely present for them as they actually are rather than as you wish they were. The mind that pauses its judgment, even briefly, even imperfectly, discovers something like rest, not blankness, not indifference, but a quality of receptive openness that is entirely different from the ceaseless evaluation. It is the difference between looking at something and seeing it. You can see things more clearly when you are not simultaneously grading them. That is Truth 53. Truth 54. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of self. This is one of the quieter truths in the Stoic tradition, and it is one that lands differently for different people. Some will read it and feel recognized. Others will need to sit with it for longer. Epictetus said something about solitude that inverts the common understanding of it. He said that a person who is genuinely comfortable in their own presence is never truly alone, and the person who needs constant company in order to feel okay is, in a meaningful sense, always alone, because they have not yet found the company of their own self. Loneliness is often not about the number of people around you. You can be lonely in a crowded room, in a full relationship, in a life that looks from the outside like a life full of connection. The loneliness is the gap between the self you are presenting to others and the self you actually are. When that gap is large, when you have been performing a version of yourself for so long that you have lost track of what the non-performing version is, the loneliness is profound, because there is no one there to be not lonely with. The Stoic practice of solitude was not a withdrawal from the world. It was a restoration of the self. The regular practice of being alone, of not filling the silence with noise, of allowing yourself to simply exist without performing for anyone. This was understood as the maintenance of the inner life, the thing that makes genuine connection with others possible. You cannot connect with others from a self that doesn't know itself. That is Truth 54. Truth 55. The news of the world does not require your constant attention. There is an argument that engaged citizens must stay informed, must know what is happening, must maintain awareness of the state of the world. This argument has genuine merit. Ignorance of the world has real costs. The person who pays no attention to what happens beyond their immediate life is failing in a certain civic responsibility. But this legitimate argument has been weaponized. in the age of continuous information, into something that does not serve anyone. The implicit demand of the attention economy is not stay informed, it is stay alarmed, stay outraged, stay engaged not with what you can actually do something about, but with the full horror of everything happening everywhere simultaneously. And the honest answer is that no human nervous system was designed for this. The nervous system that evolved to monitor the immediate environment, the village, the forest, the immediate social group, cannot process the simultaneous emotional content of a whole world in continuous crisis without cost. The Stoics would have found this self-evident. Of course, you cannot carry the weight of everything. Of course, the scope of your genuine agency is limited. Of course, the attempt to stay perpetually informed about everything, perpetually terrible, produces not engaged citizens, but exhausted, anxious, politically paralyzed people who feel terrible about the world and are too depleted to do anything about it. Choose your sphere of engagement. Know the things it is useful for you to know. Act where you can act, and protect the inner resource, the quiet mind, the capacity for clear thought, without which you cannot act effectively on anything. The world will survive your silence for one evening. That is Truth 55. Truth 56. The philosophy that does not change how you live is merely decoration. Seneca wrote this with a kind of impatience that cuts through the centuries. He wrote, "There are men who have professed philosophy not in order to be improved by it, but in order to grace their conversation with the authority of its name." He was writing about people who collected philosophical ideas the way others collect art, not to live by them, not to be changed by them, but to display them, to be seen as the kind of person who reads philosophy, to have interesting things to say at dinner. And he was merciless about this. Because for Seneca, philosophy was not ornament, it was medicine. It was the thing that could actually help with the actual problem of being a human being in a difficult world. And to use medicine as decoration is not just wasteful, it is a kind of tragedy. The measure of philosophical engagement is not how much you know, it is how you live. Whether the ideas you have encountered have actually changed anything in your choices, in your relationships, in your inner life, in how you treat the people around you. This is not a criticism, it is an invitation. Of the 55 truths we have walked through tonight, which one actually landed? Which one named something you recognized? Which one, if you were to act on it tomorrow, just one, just a small and honest beginning, would make a genuine difference to how your life feels? You do not need all 55. You need one, and you need to actually live it. The philosophy that changes nothing, changes nothing. That is Truth 56. Truth 57. Your suffering has made you more available to others. This truth is not something the Stoics stated explicitly in these words, but it is something that runs through their entire tradition. It is one of the gifts hidden inside the difficulty that you wouldn't have asked for and didn't deserve. The person who has suffered, who has been through something genuinely hard, who has sat in the dark places and found their way back, this person has something that the person who has never suffered genuinely does not have. They have a map of the dark. And when someone they love finds themselves in that darkness, the map is enormously valuable. You have been changed by the difficulties you have faced, not just in the ways that are visible and acknowledged, in subtler ways, in the quality of your attention when someone tells you they are struggling, in the speed at which you arrive at patience rather than judgment, in the particular tenderness with which you hold someone who is in the place you once were. Your suffering was not punishment. It was not evidence that you are cursed or unloved by the universe. It was the making of something. Not all suffering produces this. It depends on how it is processed, how it is met, whether it is held with honesty or buried under performance. But suffering that has been honestly carried and honestly grieved produces in time a quality of human richness that nothing else produces. The hardest parts of your life have made you more human. more capable of genuine connection, more useful to the people who love you. That is Truth 57. Truth 58. The self is not a fixed thing, it is a direction. The Stoics believed in something they called progress, prokope, the progressive advance toward wisdom and virtue. Not arrival, progress, the direction of movement. And this is liberating in a way that the goal of perfection is not. Because perfection is either achieved or not. It is binary, and no human being achieves philosophical perfection. Which means that if perfection is the goal, everyone fails. Always. But progress is available to everyone, every morning, regardless of yesterday. The self that you are is not a fixed object. It is not a thing that was completed at some point in the past and is now simply being expressed. It is a direction, a trajectory, something that is being shaped continuously by the choices you make and the attention you bring and the values you act from. This means that the version of yourself you admire, the version that is wiser and more grounded and more honest and more kind, this version is not separate from you waiting somewhere in the future to be found. This version is what you are building right now, with every choice available to you tonight. The question is not, am I there yet? The question is this choice taking me in the direction I actually want to go? That is Truth 58. Truth 59. Wisdom recognizes its own limits. There is an intellectual humility at the core of Stoic practice that is easy to overlook, because the Stoics are often presented as people who had worked everything out, who had found the system, who could face any difficulty because they had the philosophical answer to it. But read the actual texts, and what you find is something much more honest than that. Marcus Aurelius doesn't write like someone who has figured it out. He writes like someone who is trying. Constantly, patiently, sometimes wearily trying. Returning to the same failures. Acknowledging the gap between the ideal he holds and the person he is on a given day. Seneca confessed in a letter to Lucilius that he was nowhere near the philosopher he aspired to be, that the words he wrote were far ahead of the life he actually managed to live, that he was in many important respects still a work in progress, and this admission came late in his life. This is not hypocrisy. This is the honest shape of the project. The goal is not to claim wisdom. The goal is to pursue it. And the genuine pursuit of wisdom includes the acknowledgement of how much you don't yet understand. The person who is certain they have figured out how to live is the person who has stopped actually living long enough to examine it. The questions are always ahead of the answers. The territory is always larger than the map. Sit comfortably in not knowing. It is where the good work happens. That is Truth 59, Truth 60. The quality of your attention is the quality of your life. We return here near the end of this long walk to something like the first truth but seen from a greater depth. You have attention. It is limited and precious and utterly non-renewable. Every moment of it that passes is gone permanently. And the way you direct it, the quality of presence you bring to the moments of your life, this is, in the most literal possible sense, the texture of your existence. Think about the moments in your life that felt fully alive, the moments of genuine presence in connection, in nature, in work, in love, in grief, in joy. What they had in common is that you were actually there. Your attention was not split between the moment and a screen, not half present and half somewhere else. You were in the room, in the conversation, in the feeling. Those moments did not ask more of life than this. They asked more of you, more presence, more willingness to actually be where you were. The Stoics did not have smartphones. They did not live inside an attention economy. But they understood the principle, because the principle predates its modern instantiations. They understood that the scattered mind, the mind pulled in many directions, never fully anywhere, is a mind that misses its own life. You have this moment, actually, genuinely, only this moment. The The past is memory and the future is imagination, and the present is the only place where life is actually occurring. Be here, not perfectly, not permanently, but as much as you can, as often as you can, in whatever way is honest for you. Be here. That is Truth 60. Truth 61. Love is the highest form of attention. The Stoics are not typically celebrated as philosophers of love. They are known for discipline, for reason, for the endurance of difficulty. But read between the lines of the texts, in the warmth of Seneca's letters to Lucilius, in the tenderness of Epictetus toward his students, in the passages in Marcus Aurelius about his gratitude for the people who shaped him. And what you find is a tradition that understood love not as sentiment but as attention. To love someone is to attend to them, to actually see them, to hold their reality in your mind with genuine care and genuine curiosity, to be interested in who they actually are rather than who you need them to be. This kind of love, attentive, honest, not demanding that the other person conform to a role in your story. This is rarer than it sounds, because most of what passes for love in ordinary life is a mixture of genuine feeling and projection and need and the desire to be completed by another person. And the Stoics were suspicious of all forms of need, because need makes you vulnerable to the things outside your circle of control. But the love that is attention, the love that is genuine interest in the other, genuine care for their flourishing regardless of what they give back, this kind of love is, the Stoics would argue, the most virtuous engagement possible with another human being. It does not depend on reciprocation to be whole. It gives because giving is what love does. The person you love most deserves your full attention, not your distracted, half-air presence, your actual, genuine, available self. That is Truth 61. Truth 62. The city of the soul has gates. You decide who enters. Epictetus used an image that is simple and powerful. He described the rational mind as a kind of inner fortress, not impregnable. The world can throw what it throws at the walls, but with gates. And the gates have a gatekeeper. And the gatekeeper is you. What do you let in? Which voices do you give authority over your inner life? Whose opinion genuinely deserves to influence how you see yourself? What content, what media, what conversations, what relationships are you actively inviting into the interior space where you live? This is not about building walls, not about closing yourself off from the world. It is about the recognition that the interior life is not a passive receptacle for whatever the outside world wants to put there. It has a will. It has preferences. It has standards. You are allowed to decide that certain voices, particularly the loud, cruel, contemptuous voices, whether they come from outside or from inside your own head, are not welcome. Not because you're fragile, because you're discerning. You are allowed to turn off the noise. You are allowed to choose quiet. You are allowed to decide that tonight the gate is closed to everything that would disturb the peace you are building. That is Truth 62. Truth 63. Gratitude for difficulty is the advanced practice. We spoke about gratitude in part 1. The daily, deliberate practice of noticing what is here that did not have to be here. That was the foundational practice. The advanced practice is something that sounds almost perverse when you first encounter it. It is the practice of gratitude not just for the good things, but for the difficult things, for the losses that taught you what you truly valued, for the failures that redirected you towards something more honest, for the people who challenged you in ways that ultimately made you stronger, for the limitations that forced you toward depth rather than surface. Marcus Aurelius wrote, and this is one of the most striking passages in the Meditations, that he was grateful for his difficult emperor, Hadrian, who had been a complex and sometimes cruel man, for teaching him endurance. Grateful for certain teachers who had frustrated him and disappointed him, for making him more honest with himself about what he actually believed. This is not the performance of toxic positivity. It is not the demand that you be grateful for abuse or injustice or genuine cruelty. It is the recognition that the texture of a human life, the actual richness of it, the depth of character that develops in it, comes as much from difficulty as from ease. And that when you can honestly see the value in what was hard, something in you releases, not because the hard thing was good, because you found something good in how you met it. That is Truth 63. Truth 64. The present moment always will have been. This is a truth that is almost too philosophical to land cleanly on first contact, so let us slow into it carefully. Marcus Aurelius observed in his characteristic way that time is a river of vanishing moments, that each moment as soon as it arrives is immediately receding into the past, that the future is always becoming the present, which is always becoming the past, with extraordinary speed. And the awareness of this, the genuine visceral sense that this moment is passing as you experience it, can be felt as either terrifying or liberating, depending on your relationship with the present. But there is something in this truth that the Stoics found deeply stabilizing, because it means this moment right now, whatever it is, however ordinary or difficult or beautiful, this moment is being woven permanently into the fabric of what has existed. It will always have happened. It is irrevocable. That sounds like a small thing. But think about it from the inside. The moment of genuine connection you had with someone you love, it happened. Nothing can unhappen it. The small act of integrity you performed when no one was watching, it happened. The moment of beauty you noticed, the thing you understood, the choice you made well, these exist now permanently in the unchangeable record of what has been. This evening, whatever has been good in it, a thought that landed, a moment of genuine quiet, a small recognition, this will always have been, live accordingly. That is Truth 64. Truth 65. Inner freedom is the only freedom that cannot be taken. We have arrived, near the end of this third part, at something that the Stoics considered the heart of everything, the thing that all the discipline and all the practice and all the philosophy was ultimately pointing toward. Epictetus was a slave. He owned nothing. He had no freedom of movement, no freedom of occupation, no freedom of association in any formal sense. And yet he described himself, in his philosophy, as the freest man alive. This was not delusion. It was not the coping mechanism of a broken man making peace with an impossible situation. It was a genuine philosophical claim that the only freedom worth having is the one that cannot be taken. The freedom of the inner life. The freedom to choose how to meet what arrives. The freedom to maintain integrity regardless of external coercion. The freedom to think clearly and observe honestly and hold your own counsel in a world that is constantly trying to do your thinking for you. External freedom is real and valuable and worth fighting for. The Stoics did not advocate for slavery. They were describing what was available even when external freedom was absent. They were, in a sense, describing the floor, the minimum of human freedom that exists regardless of circumstances. And if that floor is available in slavery, in the most absolute form of external constraint imaginable, then it is available to you tonight, in whatever situation you find yourself, in whatever form your constraints take. You are free right now in the only way that is never taken. The inner life is yours, completely, permanently, unassailably. No one can take it. That is Truth 65. Truth 66. To live well, you need very little. This truth is near the end of this journey for a reason. It is one of those truths that can only really be heard after a long walk, after the simpler reassurances have been offered and received, and the harder ground has been covered. Because it sounds on first reading like an invitation to poverty or an argument against ambition. And it is neither. It is something more precise. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more who is poor. To live well, to have a life that feels meaningful, that is rich with genuine connection and honest work, and the daily practice of being the person you actually want to be, This requires, in material terms, very little. Not nothing, not deprivation, but very little. What it requires in interior terms is more demanding. It requires honesty, the willingness to see yourself and your life clearly. It requires attention, the capacity to actually be present for what is happening rather than always somewhere else. It requires the daily practice of returning to what you value, acting from it, and adjusting when you drift. These things are not purchased. They are not given. They are not the reward of achievement or the prize of status. They are available right now, in the life you have, with the resources you already possess, in the circumstances that are actually here. The life you are looking for is not somewhere ahead of you. It is here, in how you engage with what is already present. That is Truth 66. Truth 67. The courage to be yourself is the final courage. We live in a time of extraordinary pressure toward conformity, not the old kinds of conformity, not the pressure to dress the same or worship the same, but a subtler, more pervasive pressure to perform a particular kind of success, a particular kind of happiness, a particular kind of self that is legible to others and acceptable to the cultural marketplace of images, and behind many of the anxieties that drive people to philosophy, the restlessness, the feeling of missing something, the hollow sensation of a life that looks right from the outside and feels wrong from the inside is this: the gap between who you are performing and who you actually are. The Stoics asked again and again a question that cuts through all the noise. What do you actually believe? Not what you have been told to believe, not what would be socially acceptable to believe. What do you, in the actual interior of your actual self, genuinely hold to be true? And then, is your life consistent with it? The courage to be yourself, to live from your actual values rather than performed ones, to pursue what genuinely matters to you rather than what impresses others, to be honest in your relationships even when honesty is uncomfortable, to admit what you don't know, to acknowledge what you do wrong, to be present without armor. This is the final courage, the hardest one, the one that all the other disciplines are preparation for. It requires everything the Stoics have been teaching: the discipline of the inner life, the acceptance of what you cannot control, the return to yourself after disturbance, the willingness to be seen as you actually are rather than as you wish to be perceived. But on the other side of that courage is something the Stoics called eudaimonia, not happiness in the shallow sense. Flourishing, the particular quality of a life that is being lived honestly from the inside out. That is Truth 67. Truth 68. Death teaches us how to live. Marcus Aurelius meditated on death not because he was morbid or desperate, but because he had understood something that most people spend great effort avoiding: that the awareness of death is one of the most clarifying forces available to a human life. When you genuinely remember that you will die, not as a vague abstract fact, but as a real personal embodied understanding, certain things that seemed urgent become trivial. Certain things that seemed optional become urgent. The pettiness of old resentments becomes visible. The value of the people you love becomes luminous. The memento mori practice of the Stoics was not dark. It was a form of gratitude, a way of not sleepwalking through the finite time available. A way of ensuring that when the last day comes, and it will come for all of us sooner or later, there is not the particular grief of having been present for very little of it. You will not be here forever. Neither will the people you love. Neither will this evening, which is already passing, which is already on its way to becoming memory. The awareness of this does not have to be terrifying. It can be, if you let it, liberating. It can be the thing that wakes you up tonight to the fact that what is here is worth being present for. This moment, this breath, this quiet, this life. It is here now. That is Truth 68. Truth 69, the world does not owe you ease. This truth is not harsh, though it sounds harsh on first reading. It is one of the most freeing things the Stoics understood. We are raised in many modern contexts with a set of implicit promises about how life will go. Work hard and you will be rewarded. Be good and good things will happen to you. Follow the rules and you will be protected. These promises are not true, and the discovery that they are not true through the first major failure, the first unfair loss, the first genuine injustice that you cannot undo. This discovery is often the most painful thing that happens to a person in early adulthood. The Stoics would have saved considerable time. They would have said, "The world is not organized around your welfare. It is not designed to reward virtue or punish vice. It does not operate on the terms of human fairness. It operates on its own terms, which are impersonal, which are often brutal, which do not take into account whether you deserved what you received." This is not despair, it is liberation. Because once you stop expecting the world to be fair, once you actually, genuinely, emotionally absorb the truth that you are not owed ease and that difficulty is not evidence of failure or punishment, something loosens. The suffering caused by the unfairness stops. You are still in the difficulty, but you have stopped fighting the extra battle, the meta battle of arguing with reality about whether the difficulty should be there. It is here, it is not personal. It is not evidence against you. Now what will you make of it? That is Truth 69, Truth 70. Wherever you are is where the work is. Seneca wrote a letter to Lucilius about travel. His friend had apparently suggested that a change of scene might help with his melancholy, that going somewhere new might offer relief from his restlessness. And Seneca responded with characteristic directness, "You are sky blue and yet the same. You change the place, but not the soul. Recede in te ipse. Retreat into yourself was his prescription, not a change of location, a change of attention." The people who move to escape themselves are familiar figures who change jobs to escape the feeling that something is missing, who change cities, change relationships, change circumstances, looking for the version of their life that finally feels right, and find each time that the feeling followed them, because the feeling is not in the location. It is in the relationship between the self and the present moment, and that relationship travels with you. It is the one thing you cannot leave behind, the work. The real, deep, long work of becoming the person you actually want to be is available wherever you are, in the circumstances you are actually in, with the resources you actually have, with the people who are actually present in your life, not in the better version of your circumstances that is coming later if everything goes right here now with this. That is Truth 70. Truth 71. The examined relationship is the most enduring one. The Stoics were interested in friendship in a particular way. They distinguished between friendships of utility, people you associate with because they are useful to you, friendships of pleasure, people whose company you enjoy, and friendships of virtue, people you love because you genuinely admire who they are and they challenge you to become better. The third kind was rare. They acknowledged, truly rare, because it requires both parties to be engaged in the kind of honest self-examination that most people avoid, to be willing to be known accurately, which means being willing to be seen in your difficulty and your failure and your inconsistency, not just in your best moments. But the third kind of friendship is also the most enduring and the most nourishing, because it is not contingent on usefulness or on the maintenance of pleasant feeling. It is rooted in something that weathers the mutual, genuine care for each other's character. The examined relationship, the one where you can be honest about your struggles, where the other person can say the difficult, true thing and be heard rather than resented, where you are genuinely interested in each other's growth rather than in each other's validation. This relationship is worth more than almost anything else available in a human life, and it begins with your own willingness to be examined, to allow yourself to be known, to stop performing and start being. That is Truth 71. Truth 72. The wise person lives as if today were sufficient. not as if today were the last day. The Stoics were careful about this distinction. The last day framing produces a kind of urgency that can distort, burning bridges, making dramatic gestures, treating the ordinary as insufficient. The sufficient day framing is different. It says what I have today, the people I have access to, the work available to me, the time and the health and the attention I currently possess. This is enough to live a genuinely good day. I do not need it to be more than this. I do not need it to be better, more dramatic, more significant. I can live well today with what is actually here. This requires a kind of courage, because the mind that is always elsewhere, always in the future where things will be better, or in the past where things were worse or better or different, this mind does not have to fully arrive. It can always tell itself that the real living begins when conditions improve. To say today is sufficient is to commit, to actually show up, to put your whole self into the day that is here rather than saving your whole self for the day that is coming. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant by confine yourself to the present, not constrict yourself. Commit yourself. Be here genuinely and fully for this that is truth 72, truth 73. The quiet life is not a lesser life. The culture celebrates the loud life, the ambitious, the visible, the dramatically successful, the person who is known, who is seen, who leaves a large mark on a large stage. And there is nothing wrong with this in itself. Some people are genuinely called to large stages and occupy them with grace and do real good from there. But there is an enormous amount of quiet life that is not celebrated and is not lesser for being quiet. Marcus Aurelius never intended his meditations to be published. He was writing for himself, in private, in the margins of a life spent on a very public stage, where everything he did was watched and commented on and judged. And the private writing, the honest, searching, humble private writing is what has lasted. Not the public victories, not the military campaigns, the private conversation with himself, the person who raises children well and is known by very few, the craftsman whose work is excellent and whose name is unknown, the teacher who shapes lives without ever being recognized for it, the friend who shows up reliably in the small crises that don't make dramatic stories. These people are living large lives. They are just living them quietly. You are allowed to want a quiet life. You are allowed to find the smallness of it sufficient. You are allowed to do your good work in a room with no audience. The tree that roots deeply and grows slowly is not the lesser tree. That is truth 73. Truth 74. Equanimity is not a mood, it is a posture. We are very close now to the end. And this truth is near the end because it is the summary of everything the Stoics were working toward. All the discipline, all the reflection, all the philosophy, it was in service of this equanimity, the tranquillitas animi that Seneca wrote about. The inner stillness that is not the absence of feeling, but the capacity to be with feeling without being defined by it. The Stoics knew that they could not prevent life from being difficult. They could not prevent loss or failure, or the endless unpredictability of existence in a world that does not organize itself around human preferences. What they could build through practice, through philosophy, through the patient tending of the inner life was a posture toward all of it that held, not rigidity, not the posture of the person who refuses to be moved, but the posture of the person who can be moved, who feels fully, who is genuinely engaged with what is happening, and who returns after each disturbance to something quiet inside themselves that is not disturbed. This is not achieved, it is practiced. Epictetus did not wake up one morning fully equanimous. Marcus Aurelius did not stop struggling. They practiced daily the return, the orientation, the small patient acts of choosing attention over reaction, presence over avoidance, honesty over comfortable self-deception. And over years, the practice changed the posture. The return got a little easier, the equilibrium became a little more accessible, not perfectly, not permanently, but reliably, tenderly. Truly, that is what is available. That is Truth 74, Truth 75. You are already in this moment enough. We have walked a very long way tonight, through 50 truths about slowing the mind, through 25 truths about pain and control. And now to this final truth, which is the quietest and perhaps the most difficult to receive, not because it requires more of you, but because it asks you to stop requiring more of yourself for just a moment, to put down the project of becoming and simply be. You are right now in this moment a complete human being, not a partial one waiting for completion, not a project awaiting its final stage, a complete, whole, present human being with all of your complexity and inconsistency and struggle and beauty. The Stoics would not have said this in these words. They were focused on progress, on virtue, on the ongoing work of becoming. But underneath the work, running through the whole tradition like a quiet river, is this. The work is worth doing because the person doing it is worth the work, because you matter, because the life you are living, however ordinary it appears from the outside, is a real and genuine and unrepeatable human life. You have spent this evening in the company of Seneca and Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, people who lived more than 2,000 years ago, who suffered genuinely hard things, who asked the questions you're asking tonight, who found in the patient, honest examination of their own inner lives something that held, something that was enough. Not everything they wanted, not the absence of difficulty, but enough. And if you take only one thing from this long, slow walk, if one truth from the 75 lands and stays and becomes part of how you move through the days ahead, let it be this. You do not need to have everything figured out in order to begin living well. You do not need to be at peace in order to move toward peace. You do not need to be healed in order to start healing. You do not need to be finished in order to begin. Begin tonight with what you have, in the life that is actually yours, in the quiet of this particular hour, which will not come again, which is already passing, which is right now enough. The Stoics did not promise ease, they promised something better. They promised that the inner life, tended honestly, examined regularly, lived from with integrity, will hold, that it will prove more durable than what is taken from you, and more nourishing than what is given to you. That the person who has done the inner work will face the outer difficulty with something that functions very much like grace. Not because they feel no fear, but because they have learned that fear is not the last word. Not because they feel no grief, but because they have learned that grief is not defeat. Not because they have no questions, but because they have learned to love the questions. Marcus Aurelius ended his days as he had lived them, imperfectly, honestly, in the continuous practice of trying to be the person he believed it was worth being. He wrote in his last years not with the confidence of a sage who had arrived, but with the quiet persistence of a man who had found the practice worth keeping. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Not in a different city, not in different circumstances, not in a better version of the life that is coming, in the soul, in the inner life, in the practiced quiet of a person who has learned slowly and imperfectly and repeatedly to come home to themselves. Tonight you have sat with 75 truths. You have moved through the restlessness of the mind and the weight of pain and the question of what stillness actually is. And now the hour is late and the mind is perhaps a little quieter, not silent, not resolved, but perhaps a little less turbulent than when you started. That is enough. The work does not end tonight. It continues tomorrow and the day after, and in all the ordinary mornings yet to come. But tonight it has begun, or it has deepened, or it has been remembered after a period of forgetting. And this, the remembering, the returning, the choosing again to do the inner work, this is what the Stoics would have called living. not the absence of difficulty, the presence of yourself in the difficulty and beyond it, and always returning. The Mediterranean at night, if you close your eyes and let the words slow down into image, the Mediterranean at night is very dark and very still and very old. The same stars that Marcus Aurelius saw from his military tent are there above it. The same questions he asked in the dark of his private pages are still turning in the minds of people who cannot sleep. 2,000 years of humans lying awake with the same restlessness, the same longing, the same hunger for something that holds, and the same answer, quiet and patient, waiting in the inner life of whoever is still enough to hear it. Be here, be honest, be gentle with yourself, do the work, and trust that the inner life tended carefully, honestly, lovingly will be enough. It always has been. It is, the night is quiet now, and you are here, and that is everything.